Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review, and in this video I'm going to review Oh No by Xiu Xiu. Xiu Xiu is a project that has done multiple albums in about 20 years, and it's amazing how with each one of the albums they make, they constantly go into so many different directions of like punk and experimental rock and avant-garde rock and pop. The great thing with Xiu Xiu is that anytime you're going to get into an album, you don't know what to expect because they're constantly shifting their sounds while also having some of the certain characteristics that make each one of their albums stand out on their own. That is, of course, if you look up to some of the more popular releases that have in the bigger labels, because they also have those releases in another Bandcamp page which have their more experimental approaches, albums that not many people talk about, like the drunk commentaries, for example, which are, as the title says, drunk commentaries for basically almost each one of the main and big albums that the band has done over the years. There are also some other really wacky and just simply experimental material, like the album Clank Clank, for example. Stuff that people would more likely not talk about, not only because they're not as much promoted, but it's really clear that releases like this are only made for like hardcore fans that want to go even deeper into the depths of what Xiu Xiu have done over the years. With the case of Oh No, it was one of those big releases that people were anticipating. The latest major release from Xiu Xiu was the album Girl with Basket of Fruit, which in my opinion is one of my personal favorite albums from Xiu Xiu, and it was an extremely chaotic and disturbing album with so many different avant-garde elements, really weird structures, and bizarre lyricism. This album definitely had a dark and threatening aura to it, which really showcased Jimmy Stewart's mental state decreasing dramatically in a concerning level, because this was a really hard album to sit through. It was certainly like a really disturbing experience. Now with Oh No, we certainly get into a much different direction, which is something that I expected from this album. Like, I didn't expect to have like the same sound with like Girl with Basket of Fruit, for example. This one in some respects goes a bit closer to like some stuff from Forget. Like when I heard the very first single, A Bottle of Rum, I just got a few Forget vibes with some of the more synth pop elements. However, it still had a bit of a different feel to it, and describing the whole album by itself, I would say that it goes closer to some of the stuff that Xiu Xiu would do in like the early 2010s, but still Oh No showcases another different approach from Xiu Xiu and a really unique sound that for the most part it goes like into directions of experimental rock and art pop, but there are also many different elements, because this is one of the lengthier Xiu Xiu albums, and you have elements of folk, more experimental and avant-garde sounds, elements of industrial, but for the most part the album in some of its structures it's somewhat simplistic, and the way some of the melodies and the beats are crafted. This album in my opinion also offers a really interesting concept. This is something that happens with many albums of Xiu Xiu. Like, one of the greatest characteristics and one of the strongest points with many Xiu Xiu albums is that each one of them would have a different concept to it. And in this particular case, in each one of the tracks, in the 15 tracks over here, you have different features. It's meant to be mostly perceived as a duet album, with Jimmy Stewart being the leading role in each one of those tracks, and also having each one of those features carry on with the songs. Now, when it comes to the features, I think that almost each one of them makes the job done. There is not an occasion where I would say the features were weak. However, there was also not a case where I would say that the features did something spectacular. In most, if not all of the cases, Jamie Stewart is the leading role, and he's always the one that steals the show. I mean, he has a really special and unique voice that you don't easily find voices like the ones from Jamie Stewart, which in my opinion once again works amazingly with some of the material we get over here musically. His voice is one of a kind, and for me he's certainly one of the most intriguing vocalist for the past couple of years. Now, like I said, getting into Oh No, it was another one of those albums that I didn't know what to expect. However, to be honest, when I've heard the teasers of this thing, like A Bottle of Rum and Rampus Room, I wasn't really that much excited with what I've heard from them, and listening to this entire thing, I didn't find this to be one of the most captivating experiences I've had with a Xiu Xiu album. I think Jamie Stewart has certainly had many better ideas in the past. And this is not to say that this is a weak project, because there are certainly some really nice material over here, but many of the Xiu Xiu albums have been spectacular, so for me, Oh No goes closer into some of my least favorite material from Xiu Xiu, because I really didn't find this album to be all that engaging with its ideas. It's a really inconsistent album as well, because it tries to go into so many different directions, and also going some of the features out of their comfort zone into sounds that are mostly not used to. And I was certainly somewhat intrigued with some of the features over here, like Sharon Van Etten, for example, or Liars, or Chelsea Wolfe. But like I said, there's not a moment over here where I would find that any of the features manages to steal the show. The chemistry between the artists coming together is pretty decent, but the overall instrumentation in many of the occasions over here is slightly underwhelming sometimes. The track Sad Mezcalita, in my opinion, is a somewhat strong introduction. It's one of the better moments over here, especially when it comes to the chorus. I think it's really passionate and quite beautiful. The track I cannot resist is this somewhat piano ballad with some more avant-garde-ish elements, and it also features Drab Majesty, and in my opinion it's one of the more lackluster songs over here. And there are actually some moments over here that feel somewhat lackluster without that much going on to them, and I cannot resist is one of those songs. Also, I didn't see how Drab Majesty would contribute to this song, and I don't really think that there is all that much to it. Like, if I didn't see that there was a feature from Drab Majesty, I wouldn't have guessed, like, at all. The Grifters is also one of the more lively and emotional and powerful songs over here, in my opinion. This is one of the better moments as well. And then we get another one of those more lackluster moments, like the track Goodbye for Good, in my opinion, is one of the weakest moments over here. Like, I didn't really feel that there was something all that special to this song whatsoever. Oh No was certainly one of the more dynamic and more intense moments over here, but it's a really short song, and certainly one of those moments where I think that it had an interesting idea, but it didn't really develop it as much. Also, I couldn't help it but feel slightly underwhelmed with tracks like Rumpus Room and Fuzz Gong Night, even though there were some of those tracks I had a bit of a more anticipation from them. One of the tracks that pleasantly surprised me was 100 Years. I had high expectations for this track because it also had a feature from Chelsea Wolfe, but since many of the songs before would go into somewhat folky directions, I expected the same thing to happen with this track as well. However, this is one of the more unique moments over here, as it goes into some more straight up dark wave and post-punk elements, and the track caught me off guard, and in my opinion it's one of the most effective and one of the most captivating moments over here. It's still not like a superb and amazing song, but it's certainly one of the most compelling moments over here. A classic screw and It Bothers Me All the Time were some of those tracks that I didn't really love. However, there were certainly the two songs with the most experimental attitude to them. Especially It Bothers Me All the Time has some really intense and weird chaotic moments, something that would come closer to directions from Girl with Basket of Fruit, for example, and so it definitely had some intriguing moments. However, as a whole thing, this track was definitely lackluster in some parts. For me, the final highlight out of this album was the track Knockout featuring Alice Bag. This track was pretty interesting. I like the beats to this thing, I like the overall sentiment and the overall sound of this. It was certainly one of the more intriguing moments in my opinion. Other than that, there is not really that much to it. I already feel that A Bottle of Rum is a really decent moment, but not something all that outstanding. And also there is the 15-second ants, which, yeah, it's kinda necessary for a finisher, but whatever. The album, in my opinion, also doesn't really have that much of a great sound, like something that would really hit me. The thing is that the mixing of Xiu Xiu in many occasions has certainly been all over the place. Their albums definitely have a weird sense of mixing. However, in this occasion, I wasn't really feeling that the mixing was all that well complemented. There were many things coming together, but in many occasions I felt like something was missing. In my opinion, Xiu Xiu are at their best when they go into some of their more intense stuff. Of course, they have managed over the years to make some incredibly heartfelt and more soothing material, but I don't feel that this is that much of the case with Oh No. It is a bit of a mess when it comes to its sounds. It tries to go into many directions, some of them work nicely, others not so much, and it ends up feeling like a sort of a lengthy album. I of course understand it because it tries to just put all of those features together, but I was certainly not intrigued with all of the material that was presented over here. So for me, this was certainly not one of the greatest Xiu Xiu albums. Fans would definitely find some really nice and charming moments, and I think that this album definitely has some pretty good moments. As a whole thing, this is certainly though not one of the greatest achievements from them in my opinion. I'm going to give Oh No a 6 out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.